Hello everyone and welcome back. This is session 2 of a package of 2 sessions I've developed for Kimberley, and this one is going to be about how we can support children's personal, social and emotional development. Let's get started. I would like to begin looking at the holistic approach that we currently use in a lot of settings in the United Kingdom and internationally. And within the holistic approach, where we look at the child as a whole, I like to start looking at what love can do for children. When is it that we talk about love, and why are we sometimes perhaps a little bit scared of using that word within a setting where we have perhaps more of a professional connection with children? I like to quote the work of Jules Page, and this particular quote I think puts things into perspective at the beginning of the presentation. This is love as an integral, essential pedagogical concept both in early years settings and in training and education for them. I think this really explains why love has to be something that it is discussed in settings. It is okay to feel and express love when you work with children, because that is what will help you connect with children, and that's what will help you make those interactions meaningful and purposeful. And it means that it's a special type of love. It's the love that you feel for the children in your care. And when that you feel relaxed about using that concept of love from the perspective of the practitioner, then you will start understanding how it is okay to have feelings and express emotions towards children. Those emotions that will help them flourish. Let's look at real life scenarios and remember that concept of love and that sense of attachment that children have with their main carers, who tend to be their parents, mother, father, their parents, I would say, because it could be either. And that connection and that attachment that could develop with the secondary caregiver, who would be the early years practitioner. In a real life scenario, what happens when a young 2-year-old struggles to say goodbye to mummy in the morning? How would you support the child? What strategies would you put in place to support the family? This is a clear example of a scene that I'm sure you've witnessed in your settings many times. What's important here is that we cannot break that need for attachment, that need for love that the child has with the caregiver, in this case the parent, without trying to support both the child and the mum or the dad, and that connection, that special bond that there is between them. We cannot simply break it because the child enters a new environment, and it's very, very important to take into account. So I'd like you to take a few minutes to think about this. You know, there is an emotional struggle, there is a child and possibly a parent who's finding it difficult to enter a new environment, who's finding it difficult to have to cope, have to emotionally be strong to cope within an environment where that parent, that special person they have a bond with, is not going to be there. So take a few minutes to think about this, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Now, how are we going to make that moment of saying goodbye easier for the child and for the parent? How are we going to help the child understand that the love that the parent feels for the child is not stopping, that the parent is not permanently disappearing? How are we going to support that crucial stage of transition? We have to do it connecting with parents. We have to allocate time to connect with parents and the child before the child starts in the setting. We have to organise visits, we have to organise moments in which the child can play in the setting with the parent, and also the interaction of the practitioner. And we have to think about how to do it depending on the child. So in a lot of settings I visit, I see that parents are given questionnaires before the child starts in the setting, and those give a really in-depth picture of what the child is like, and they also ask a lot of questions about family life and what goes on when the child is not in the setting. And I find them really, really important, and the information that they provide is crucial. However, I would suggest going beyond that. I would suggest establishing a connection with the family face to face and finding the time to sit down and discuss the child's responses within the setting. So invite the family in with the child for a short session. It doesn't have to be longer than 30-40 minutes, where the child can just join in and try to interact with the children or not, get to know the environment, see what's there, so he becomes familiar with that new scenario he's going to be part of. And also see how the parent interacts with the child, how the parent chooses or not to get involved in whatever the child chooses to do. And then also a together time, a time where the parent might be interacting with the child, observing the child, or even taking part in one of the activities the child is doing, whilst the practitioner is also part of that cycle. That is so important, and practitioners I've worked with who have allocated time for this to happen have found that the process of settling in the child has had to experience when they first start in the setting has been much easier, and the child has learned that emotionally they can connect with a lot of other people. However, that special connection, that special bond they have with their parent doesn't stop because they spend time away from them. When I talk to practitioners and university students who have been or are going to placement in schools or nurseries or different types of organisations, we discuss how to develop strategies to connect with children. Now, what's really, really important to remember is that because we are very conscious of the fact that children are first of all connecting with the world around them, and that those personal, social and emotional skills will only develop when those connections start happening with or without the support of an adult. We need to take into account that we are not there to teach the children to fit into the new environment. We are there to understand how they've chosen to explore the world and how are they finding that new environment. Now, when they're part of that new environment, we will be supporting them emotionally so that they can establish the connections they need to with other children, with the environment itself, with other adults, and then learn that in that type of environment, that's how things work. However, this doesn't mean that we want them to fit into a mold that we've created for them. They still need to be themselves and need to be allowed to express themselves and flourish at their own pace and show their abilities and the skills when they are exposed to new experiences. It's very, very important to remember that it's not that they have to fit into the environment and the new routine. We have to look at the routines and the child, let the child explore them, let the child understand them, and then slowly let the child interpret them so that they can be part of that environment. What I'm trying to say is that we don't have to be rigid about how children cope in a new environment. Getting to know children before they join the setting, as I've said before in previous slides, and developing what I call starting settling in strategies that suit each child's needs. That's what's really crucial here, that we may have a settling in period or a couple of things that we might do with some children, but until we know more about each child, we don't know whether the same strategy is likely to work with all of them. It might just be that we have to adapt strategies because of the emotional needs of the child. And that's really, really important to take into account. I'd like to talk now about my sack of emotions, which is one of the tools I use with practitioners and with children. I've also used them with families. They can be used in many ways, but today I'm going to focus on telling you how I can use them with children, and you could use them with children. You can get in touch with me via my webpage, which you will be able to see at the end of this presentation. And we can discuss perhaps whether you would like to start using them in your setting. Let me explain to you how I use them. These sacks of emotions are all different. There are not two sacks that are the same, and I'll explain to you why in the next slide. When I introduce the sack of emotions, I talk about experiences. I talk to practitioners and families, and at their level with children too, about experiences. And I talk about the fact that experiences make us who we are, and to support young children and their families, it's important to be aware of this. The sack of emotions can have small items in it that help children feel that what matters to them also matters to the adults that care for them in any environment. Now, the way I would present it to children would be that they would choose their own sack of emotions. Let's say that we could have a choice of 6. Now let's remember that there will not be 2 sacks the same. There will never be 2 sacks the same, because the sacks are made from different bits of fabric, and we make sure that there are not 2 the same. And this is precisely because they symbolize the fact that we are all unique. We are made out of all the different experiences we are part of, and we're all unique. So the child chooses 1. Let's say from a choice of 6, sometimes a choice of 10, chooses 1. The child then makes a label with the name of the child. Whether the child makes the label independently with the support of an adult, that is for you to decide in your setting. You know your children. And now the child will choose small items from home or the setting, or both, to be kept in this sack. Now consider the fact that these sacks are not very big. They are about the size of a mobile phone of today, a bit wider, so there's a little bit more space than there would be for a mobile phone, so you have a bit of an idea. And the items that we discuss in this presentation are I try to choose natural items. Why I choose natural items? Because when children choose them, it's important that they choose them whilst they're interacting with adults that are meaningful to them. Here's where the establishing that bond and that special connection, which could be slowly translated into love, professional love in the setting, the love from a parent if it's their home environment. So when the child chooses those items, there are a series of interactions that take place and help the child make those choices. Let's say that the items they choose have a significance. As I was saying, the sack is going to be about the child, so it has to be meaningful to the child. So the child will be the one who will make a label with like a little tag with the name on it, with help or not if they need it. That's for the practitioner and the child to decide. And the sack will be labeled. It will have a name tag, so the child will know that as well as recognizing the sack that they chose, they also recognize the tag that they made. Now the things that normally go in the sack, and I tend to use items that children can collect from when they go for walks with parents. Some children bring things from home that, little items that they've had or they've used whilst playing with parents. Some children bring hair clips that may belong to mum, or hair clips that mum bought them, or bracelets that mum or dad or grandma bought them. But I suggest that they are items that have some kind of significance, even if the child can't explain exactly why they're there. That we will work on that significance with the child as the child shares what they mean to them with us. What I also recommend is that there is then a special place where these children feel they can leave their sacks. In the settings where I've suggested this practice, And I hope in future presentations I'm able to show you how this works and where they've been placed in different settings. They tend to use hooks, you know. They either make them themselves or they adapt other hooks that they have on the walls. They tend to do that. In some settings they use drawers. But I would like to suggest that you choose a special place, a special space that is chosen with the children, where and then what we do is we're letting them know that they are part of that environment. They have played an important part in choosing where things are going to be displayed. By doing this, their sack of emotions, which is what makes them who they are, the unique sack that contains items of significance to them, is giving them a voice, is telling them that they matter. What we're going to do is we're going to allow children to explore the world around them in the setting, and we're going to have this sack of emotions as a tool that is going to appear and be used as and when the child feels the need to. So we can either find time to talk about the items in the sack and what they remind the children of, or we're going to suggest that they carry them around the room or the environment if they choose to do so, or they can leave it in a designated place for sacks of emotions. That will be the place that we have chosen with them. We've made that choice. We've let them have ownership of what occurs in that environment. Remember? If at any time they decide to talk about what they carry in the sack, it's important to acknowledge this. What we're doing is we're teaching them that what they feel and what they remember and what's of significance to them matters to us too. So we're helping them develop that sense of inclusion. We're helping them develop those relationships, those positive relationships that we discussed during session 1. Now listen to children when they choose to tell you about something that is meaningful to them. The items in their sacks offer them security, and being able to talk about them makes them feel that they really, really matter. During session 1, we discussed how it was really important to use observations when we work with young children. I would suggest that we use observations in earlier year settings with children in the foundation stage and even with children in Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. Why? Because as children explore the world around them, new emotions appear. Now, some of those emotions have already been given them a name as we interact with children and we help them understand their own emotions and we help them express them and we help them control them and we help them use them when they need to use them. And some of them might not have a name yet, and it is normal that children don't understand some of those emotional reactions they have. Well, that's why it's so important to acknowledge the fact that it's okay to express all kinds of emotions. Now we have to learn how and when to express them. I'd like to remind you of a quote that I used during the presentation for session 1 that talks about how emotions can be demonstrated, but some emotions are not demonstrated because for the individual it's not always easy to understand them. Let's remember that an emotion is an internal subjective experience and that we can only observe as practitioners the external signs. So know your children, really know your children, spend time getting to know them so you can understand whether those emotions are shown or not. And when you do, it will be then that you will be able to support them. As I was saying before, there are emotions without a name. Now those without a name, what do we do with those without a name? Now some emotions are unique to each individual and it is often hard to describe them. At times like this, it might be easier to describe the sensation in a part of the body without naming the emotion. For example, my tummy hurts and I don't want to play with anyone now, a child could say, or this is just a version of something a child could say. The message is telling us that the child is experimenting something she or he is uncomfortable with. Observe the child, interact and or support if comfort is needed to regain own sense of security. So what's important here is not that we teach them anything new. What's important here is that we help them deal with that sensation, that emotion they don't understand. And so that they can move on and they can learn that whenever they feel like that, there will be a way to deal with it. We need to teach them to accept that sometimes they will have those feelings and that we will have to together develop ways to understand them, accept them and move on. I remember discussing over the years with many practitioners and parents and teachers who haven't always agreed with the perspective of bringing love to the classroom or to the early years setting. I remember discussing how it was okay to connect with children physically, so use hugs and stroke their heads or find a way to stroke their back, because that bond that you can create with children when you are the secondary caregiver will offer them such great support. So I was just doing a little bit of research to help me with an article that I recently wrote, and I came across an article by Whiston and Jicot, and I found it really, really interesting. I've used a quote here just to remind you that it's okay to create a bond and a special connection with children, and that it is okay to call it love. And it says that science is now showing why babies' brains need love more than anything else. So there are many ways you can demonstrate and show this type of comfortable connection with children. It's up to the practitioner and the setting and the needs of the children. What's important here is that you know about the background of the child, you know what experiences the child has gone through, and you know what type of connection you can have. It's about knowing the child. There are children who can't cope with that body contact, then you will find other ways. There are children who may just feel comfortable enough holding your hand, but they need to feel loved, and that is the biggest tool you have, is to offer them that love that will create a truly meaningful connection that will help their brain develop. There are times when children choose to walk away from a situation because they don't understand how they're feeling or they're unable to express those emotions. It is okay to acknowledge that, and it is okay to give them that little bit of space. Now, obviously it will depend on the age, but it is always important to monitor how that's occurring and how often that occurs, because children sometimes do need you even though they don't ask for help. You really need to assess that situation and try to understand why and how often this is happening and how you can support the child. It might be that the interaction with you is what's needed at some point. It might just be that the child needs time away until they feel comfortable and strong enough to move on and join in again or continue with whatever they were doing. You need to then explore the opportunity to discuss how they might have been feeling. It's important that you adapt to the child, and it's important that because you will know each child, you will find a way to support them. So remember, each child will need a different type of interaction because we are all unique. It might just be that you use your sack of emotions and you sit with the child and try to get them to take things out and chat about those things. That means that all those things will bring the child comfort. At some point during the conversation, you may feel it is appropriate to then say, "Are you okay now? Would you like to talk about what happened? Can I help you? Is there anything you need?" Before you dig into what the problem might have been what might have caused that expression of emotions. You are telling the child that you're there, he's secure, he's connecting with him or herself and you, and then once all those things that make the child feel comfortable are there, once the child feels truly secure, you know if it's appropriate to try to find out how to understand what made them feel the way they did. Remember to consider each child individually. I would also like to talk about my mood stars. Now, this is a resource you can actually buy online. It's a very, very useful resource that I have now seen being used in many settings. These are stars that actually express the 8 most common emotions, and that children can use when they want to express how they are feeling, because they at times find it difficult to use words that describe those emotions. This is a great resource. I have now seen it being used in many, many settings. The stars are soft, they're easy to carry, they get attached to this board. They come with little books that help children talk about emotions. They can be used at circle time, they can be used with families, they can be used in a one-to-one. I find them a really great resource to help children simply connect with themselves, connect with you, connect with others, and work on building those positive relationships with themselves, the children around them, the adults around them, and ultimately the world they live in. The idea behind my mood stars, it's very, very interesting because I like the way Wendy White presents them as tools that can help children express how they feel. They can help children actually express their emotions. Each star has a facial expression on it, and they are given a name, and it's the name of that emotion. Those 8 stars represent 8 emotions, and when children start understanding that each one of those facial expressions means something, they use them all the time to talk about how they feel. They use them to tell others how they feel. They use them to tell themselves how they feel. And it's really important to have tools that can help children express emotions. Now, what I find is that, especially with children who don't have the language to express how they feel, having tools like this is so useful. I would recommend that you, if you can, you have a look at how the My Mood Stars work. They come with a booklet that you can use to do games in your setting. You can actually use the book however you feel is most appropriate for your children, or even create new activities from it. I recommend this resource. I think it would be helpful for children with all kinds of emotional needs, whether those needs are everyday needs of children as they develop, or whether it is because you just want children to feel comfortable acknowledging emotions. I am acknowledging once more where the photographs are from. It's really, really important to acknowledge where all sources come from. Thank you very much for joining me for these 2 sessions for Kimberley. I have truly enjoyed recording them. It's been very, very interesting for me as well. I hope you get in touch with me via my website. I would be happy to discuss the use of the Sack of Emotions and support you if you're interested in getting some. I look forward to doing any more presentations for you in the future or working with you. Thank you.